One of the most overlooked but telling signs of a woman who cheats in secret is emotional distance. Subtle, strategic, and almost always intentional. Long before any physical affair begins, something much quieter starts to shift her presence. Not her physical presence. She's still there, still going through the motions, but her energy, her engagement, her emotional depth starts to fade. And if you're not paying close attention, you'll chalk it up to stress, work, mood swings. But it's something deeper. She's mentally stepping away, preparing space for someone else. This kind of emotional detachment doesn't happen overnight. It begins gradually with conversations that feel shorter, with less eye contact, with a tone that becomes more transactional. Where there was once softness, there's now formality. Where there was openness, there's deflection. It's not that she stopped talking, it's that what she says is now carefully filtered, edited, distanced. She no longer shares her inner world with you because someone else is beginning to occupy that space. From a psychological standpoint, this is called emotional withdrawal, and it's one of the earliest indicators of betrayal. People don't cheat because they simply find someone more attractive. They cheat when they've emotionally left the relationship, but haven't yet physically exited it. The affair becomes a symptom of a deeper disconnection, and emotional withdrawal is the silent rehearsal for that disconnection. It's her internal way of loosening the bond before breaking it. Many men don't notice this because they confuse presence with connection. They think she's still coming home, still saying goodnight, still replying to texts. But presence without emotional engagement is like sitting next to someone in silence on a long train ride. You're physically close, but miles apart in experience. That distance, if ignored, creates a void. And where there's a void, secrets begin to grow. It's also important to understand that women who cheat secretly are often emotionally intelligent. They know how to give just enough to keep suspicion low. They may still cook your favorite meal. They may still smile at you in public. But the feeling behind those actions is absent. They're not expressions of love. They're mechanisms of control. They maintain the illusion of connection while carefully pulling away underneath it. Philosophically, this boils down to alignment. When someone is truly aligned with you emotionally, there is congruence between their words, actions, and energy. But when alignment fractures, what you feel no longer matches what you're being shown. And that dissonance, that emotional inconsistency, is not something to ignore. It's something to investigate, not with accusation, but with clarity. So if you sense that she's there, but not with you, that the conversations have become shallow, that her affection is routine, that her eyes no longer meet yours with depth, don't brush it off. That is not a phase. That is a red flag wrapped in silence. Because before she ever gives her body to someone else, she gives them something even more sacred, her attention. And once her attention leaves you, everything else is only a matter of time. A woman who's cheating secretly will rarely announce it with words, but she will begin to build walls. And one of the first places those walls go up is around her privacy. Suddenly, the woman who used to scroll freely beside you now tilts her phone away. She starts locking her screen, deleting conversations, changing passwords. At first, it seems innocent, maybe even justified. She'll say, "I just need my space," or "You don't need to be in my phone." And while privacy is healthy, secrecy is not. There's a difference, and knowing that difference can save you from being emotionally blindsided. This shift doesn't scream, it whispers. She'll become vague about where she's been, who she was with, or why she didn't respond. Her stories start to sound overly rehearsed or missing small details that used to come naturally. It's not that she's lying all the time. Sometimes it's just omission, and that's what makes it so difficult to detect. But in psychology, there's a name for this: behavioral concealment. It's when someone begins to protect certain areas of their life, not because of boundaries, but because of guilt. Cheating doesn't always begin with physical touch. It often begins with protection of a secret. That secret may be a person, a conversation, an emotional connection that hasn't crossed the physical line yet, but is already violating the emotional bond in your relationship. So she protects it, not to be cruel, but to avoid confrontation, to avoid having to face the truth within herself. You'll feel it before you fully understand it. It's that sinking feeling when her phone lights up and she flips it over. It's the unease when she suddenly starts taking her phone into the bathroom or out on walks, even during conversations. It's in the change of routine that no longer includes you. And here's the most deceptive part. When you raise concerns, she might make you feel like the problem. She'll accuse you of being insecure, controlling, or paranoid, all to deflect attention from her own shift in behavior. But don't confuse gaslighting for truth. When someone starts guarding their digital life like it's a vault, when they become hyper aware of how much you're seeing, that's not privacy, that's strategy. They're not just hiding something, they're preparing for something. Emotionally, they're creating a separate world that doesn't include you. A world where new connections grow in silence, nurtured by the distance they've put between you and their truth. Philosophically, loyalty is not just about who you touch. It's about who you give access to. It's about the transparency of your life when no one's watching. And when secrecy enters a relationship, trust begins to exit quietly, unnoticed, until one day you realize you've been in love with a stranger. So if you're seeing these shifts, don't rush to accuse, but don't sit in denial either. Observe, reflect, protect your peace. Because when someone starts hiding their truth, they've already started stepping away from yours. One of the most telling yet misunderstood signs of secret infidelity is a sudden shift in her schedule. More chaos, more unpredictability, more moments that just don't add up. You might notice that her routine, once stable and familiar, becomes increasingly vague. She's going out more often, staying out later, adding unexplained errands to her day, and spending weekends or evenings with the girls, far more frequently than usual. It all sounds innocent enough. But when her time becomes harder to track and her stories start leaving subtle blanks, you're not being paranoid. You're picking up on a pattern. Time, when managed honestly, is consistent, even in a busy life. People in healthy relationships make space for their partner, and they do it willingly. But when someone is cheating in secret, time becomes their most flexible tool and their most critical alibi. She needs windows to create distance and privacy. So her schedule becomes a moving target. And instead of inviting you into those new activities, she keeps them just far enough out of reach to avoid questions. You ask, "Where were you?" And her answer is vague, just out. You ask, "With who?" And she says, "You don't know them." At first, you might dismiss it. You tell yourself she's just being more independent. You want to respect her freedom because that's what a supportive partner does, right? But here's the deeper psychological truth. When behavior starts changing without any logical or emotional explanation, it's often because something else is quietly taking priority. Cheating doesn't begin with the act. It begins with the space to commit the act. And the quickest way to create that space is to restructure time. It's not always blatant. It can look like late, night work meetings that never existed before, sudden interest in solo trips, or after hours hangouts with people you've never met, and she doesn't offer to introduce you to. This doesn't mean every busy woman is unfaithful. But when the pattern includes secrecy, deflection, and a lack of shared context, that's when you need to pay attention. Emotionally, this behavior often comes with justification. If you question it, she might say you're being clingy or trying to control her. But notice the tone. If you're made to feel guilty for asking completely reasonable questions, that's a deflection tactic. She's not protecting her schedule, she's protecting the hidden reality behind it. And philosophically, what does this tell us? That fidelity is not only about who someone is with, it's about how someone moves when they think you're not watching. Someone who values the relationship honors your presence, even in your absence. If her schedule becomes a mystery, if her routine excludes you more than includes you, that's not growth. It's evasion. So when her time starts stretching and her stories start shrinking, listen carefully. Not just to what she says, but to what's missing. Because real love doesn't make you feel like you're chasing the truth. And when time becomes a cover, trust becomes a casualty. One of the more subtle signs that a woman may be cheating, especially when it's done in secret, is when she starts comparing you to other men. And I'm not talking about playful banter or innocent admiration. I'm talking about those sharp, quiet comparisons that slowly chip away at your confidence. The kind that are delivered with a smile, but land like a warning. She'll say things like, "Did you see how he handled that? So confident." Or, "He really knows how to treat a woman." At first, it seems like casual commentary, but over time, you begin to notice a pattern. The compliments you used to receive have been replaced with subtle reminders of what you're not. Now, here's what makes this behavior dangerous. It doesn't feel like betrayal at first. It feels like critique, maybe even a call to grow. But underneath that is something much more calculated. She's not just observing other men, she's measuring you against them. And in doing so, she's creating an emotional wedge, a mental shift that allows her to start justifying her detachment from you while elevating the idea of someone else. From a psychological perspective, this is a process called cognitive justification. It happens when someone knows they're drifting emotionally or physically, but isn't ready to confront their own disloyalty. So instead, they begin crafting a narrative that makes you seem like the one who's falling short. And in doing so, they allow themselves to feel less guilty for their actions. Because now it's not cheating. It's escaping a partner who didn't measure up. You may notice her tone when she talks about other men. There's a spark, a lightness, a sense of admiration that used to be reserved for you. But now, when she speaks to you, it's criticism, it's correction. She highlights what's missing, never what's working. And that emotional comparison becomes the silent engine driving her disconnection. Philosophically, this points to something deeper. Comparison is the thief of contentment. When someone begins habitually comparing you to others, they are no longer rooted in gratitude for what they have. They are reaching for something else, even if that something is undefined. And when that reaching goes unchecked, the heart begins to wander. The danger here is that you, as her partner, may respond by trying harder, doing more, proving your worth, performing love like it's a competition. But no amount of effort will change someone who has already mentally left the relationship. You can't outperform someone's fantasy of better, and you shouldn't try. So if you find yourself being compared consistently, unfairly, and always to your detriment, don't internalize it. Recognize it as what it is, a signal. She's not trying to inspire you, she's emotionally disengaging. And comparison is the smoke that tells you a fire is already burning, just out of sight. Because when admiration shifts from you to someone else, and she starts building narratives around your inadequacy, what you're hearing isn't feedback. It's preparation for an exit she doesn't want to admit yet. And the moment someone starts preparing to leave you in their mind, it's only a matter of time before they act on it. One of the most confusing signals a woman can send when she's cheating, especially secretly, is a sudden shift in her level of intimacy. And not just physical intimacy, but emotional as well. What used to feel consistent and rooted begins to swing wildly. One week she's more affectionate than usual, overly attentive, even seductive. The next she's cold, distant, disinterested. The inconsistency keeps you emotionally off balance, constantly trying to figure out which version of her you're going to get, and more importantly, what you might have done to cause the change. But here's the truth. These fluctuations often have nothing to do with you, and everything to do with the internal conflict she's navigating. When a woman is cheating or emotionally investing in someone else, guilt and justification start to battle inside her. On one hand, she knows what she's doing is a betrayal. On the other, she may convince herself that it's a response to something lacking in the relationship. So what happens? She overcompensates. She suddenly becomes affectionate to soothe her guilt. It's not love, it's penance. This is why those moments of increased intimacy can be misleading. You might feel hopeful, thinking the spark is back, or that things are finally improving. But in many cases, that surge of closeness is simply a psychological mask. It's her way of saying to herself, I still care, I'm still a good partner. It's less about you and more about easing her own conscience. And once that emotional release passes, the guilt recedes and she slips back into withdrawal. Emotionally unavailable, physically detached, this inconsistency is not accidental. It's the byproduct of a divided emotional world. And if you're not aware of what's happening, you'll start to internalize the shifts. You'll blame yourself, thinking you're not doing enough, not saying the right things, not being the partner she needs. But this is the trap. The more unstable she becomes, the more stable you try to be. And in doing so, you lose sight of what's really going on behind the curtain. From a psychological standpoint, this is rooted in cognitive dissonance. She's torn between who she sees herself as a loyal, loving partner and what she's doing in secret. So she seeks to align her actions with her self-image, not by stopping the cheating, but by keeping you emotionally engaged just enough to avoid feeling like she's fully left. And philosophically, what does this reveal? That intimacy, when used as a tool for emotional manipulation, is one of the most deceptive masks in any relationship. When someone weaponizes closeness, giving it when convenient, withdrawing it when it suits them, they're no longer offering love. They're managing guilt. So if you find yourself caught in this cycle of hot and cold, of affection followed by absence, don't just react to the surface. Listen to the rhythm underneath. Ask yourself what's changed and why it no longer feels safe to trust her consistency. Because love, real love, doesn't play tug of war with your heart. And when someone's intimacy becomes a pattern of guilt-driven performance, what you're feeling is not love reborn. It's betrayal rehearsed. Another deeply telling sign, one that often gets overlooked because it hides in plain sight, is when she becomes obsessively private. Not just protective of her space, but defensive about her phone, her whereabouts, her social media activity. Things that were once open and fluid between you suddenly become locked down. She guards her messages, deletes her call history, or always seems to have her phone flipped face down. If you ask a simple question like, "Who were you talking to?" and she responds with irritation or evasion, you're not just dealing with a woman who values privacy. You may be dealing with someone who's actively hiding another version of herself. The mistake many people make in relationships is confusing secrecy with independence. Healthy independence means she has her own interests, time, and space, and so do you. But secrecy is different. Secrecy operates in shadows. It builds walls in places where there used to be windows. A cheating woman often creates these new barriers not just to hide the affair, but to create a psychological distance from you. It's her way of slowly separating identities, hers with you and hers with someone else. This shift often starts subtly. She changes her phone password without explanation. She starts going out more, but you're no longer invited, or she's vague about the details. Just out with some friends, she says, but doesn't name them. Or she starts using vague language when talking about her day, removing any specifics that would otherwise help you feel emotionally included. Over time, you start to feel like a stranger in your own relationship. And the more private she becomes, the more paranoid you might feel. But here's the catch. She'll often flip the script. If you express concern or ask for clarity, she may accuse you of being controlling, insecure, or invasive. This reversal is strategic. It keeps you from asking more questions by making you question yourself instead. That, right there, is emotional manipulation cloaked in the language of autonomy. Psychologically, this form of secrecy aligns with compartmentalization. She is mentally dividing her life into separate categories, what she allows you to see, and what she keeps hidden. And as this divide deepens, the emotional bond between you weakens. Trust erodes not just because of what's being hidden, but because of how you're made to feel about suspecting it. Philosophically, relationships are built not on surveillance, but on transparency. And when transparency disappears, so does the foundation of trust. You should never have to become a detective in your own relationship. When a partner's behavior forces you into that role, something has already broken beneath the surface. So what do you do when you're met with secrecy disguised as independence? You stop arguing with the symptoms and start honoring the signs. You don't need proof of cheating to feel the presence of betrayal. The truth always shows itself, not just in what's said, but in what's suddenly no longer shared. Because when a woman starts hiding pieces of herself, it's often because she's already given them to someone else.